Hi, I'm Helen. Thanks for joining me as I sew the Adrian Bra, patterned by Of Elizabeth Studios, in the Architecture Kit by Nellie Jones. This is the Architecture Kit. It has everything you need to sew one underwire bra and briefs. It features this lovely dainty floral embroidered tulle as the main fabric and some lovely supporting blue elastics. I've got a little inspiration picture on the front here, and that is what I'm going to sew today. It's an Adrian Bra. Show you my original sketch. The difference to my sketch is I've decided I like to keep the scalloped edge along the front middle section of the band, so I will have to make a change to the pattern piece for this. The other point I need to do is make sure I end up with a nice scalloped top cup and that my scallops meet at that low point. So we'll go over that now in cutting out for those. The couple of things I need to watch out for when I'm cutting out is to make sure I have a continuous uninterrupted line of scallops across the top edge of the cup. So this means where my two cut pieces seam together, here where the seam allowances overlap, I need a low point of the scallops to be at that point. So when I line it up to my fabric, I need to make sure I'm lining up my seam allowance on the both pieces to a low point of the scallop, like so. The rest of the straight line of the cup follows the low points of the scallops as well. And then the same on this inner cup. It will need to line up to a low point on the scallop. That way, when I sew them together, these two low points will be together, and you'll get an uninterrupted scalloped edge. Now this is the change that I need to make to the bridge piece to ensure that I've got the lovely scalloped edge poking out below the bottom of the band. So this is the original pattern piece, and this is the elastic where it turns under. So what I've done is just removed that elastic part from the bottom because we won't be turning this piece under with the elastic. Then we need to line it up on our scallop edge with the lowest point of the scallop touching either end here. You can, depending on your fabric you're using, decide whether you want a center scallop or the low point in the center. A deciding factor will be how much extra depth you have here. Try to make it the least amount possible. If I bring this into the middle, it works a little bit better for my scallops there. So I would cut it out like this with my two end points meeting the low point of the scallops. And we don't remove this part in the middle because that will make up part of the band extension for the scallops. Now you're not making any changes to the rest of your frame. This part will still have the elastic attached to it. So when it is sewn together, it will step out a little bit further. That's because we are folding this under with the elastic on the sides of the frame. I'm not having a scalloped edge on the sides here, just the center part. So this will be the step in the pattern piece that allows us to do that. And when we cut this piece out of our lining piece, the lining will go straight across this low point of the scallops. So it won't be cut out to this line, it will be cut into this line here, and the scallop edge will extend further than the lining. So I'm going to cut out all my pattern pieces as per the instructions on the cup of what I need in the tulle, the lining and the power net. I like to cut it out with a rotary cutter, and I will meet you back here to lay it out. When I'm sewing a bra, I like to lay all my pieces out to start with in the position that they would be on the bra. That way I can really keep an eye on all the mirrored pieces and make sure that I'm not mucking any up or putting them in the wrong place. So here you can see I've got my bridge piece, the outer embroidered tulle and the inner sheer cup lining. I've got the left cup of the bra as worn. I've got the double layer of the inner cup and the double layer of the outer cup. Same for the right side of the bra. I've got the outer frame pieces, the embroidered tulle and the sheer cup lining, and then I've got my stretch power net band. So when I'm sewing, as I'm sewing the pieces together, I keep popping them back in place, and that way I've got really good control over making sure that nothing gets muddled up. I'm going to start sewing the cup pieces, so I'm just going to bring these forward so that I can sew them. Pin them together, and I'll just move these up to give myself some room, still keeping them in the order that I want them. So popping these up here, I need to grab the pattern pieces to mark my notches, and then I'll be able to pin my layers together. So marking my notches with a pin, move my sheer cup lining layer out of the way for a minute. I'm just going to line this up on my pattern piece and pop a pin in where that knot, whoops, helps if you don't do things at an awkward angle. Pop a pin in where that notch is there. Do the same for my outer cup piece. I'll just move the lining piece out of the way for a moment. Line that one up. So we've got a pretty easy cup here. It's only a 2-part cup, but we do want a nicely enclosed seam. So to get that, I need to pop the 2 outer cup pieces, the embroidered tulle right sides together. Then my inner sheer cup lining piece, I'm going to mark the notch. Gets placed on top of that. So I've got my 2 inner cup pieces here. And then my outer cup piece needs to go on top of that. So I'll mark the notch on this one. That needs to go on here. So my little sandwich is my outer cup sheer cup lining, my inner cup sheer cup lining, my inner cup embroidered tulle, and my outer cup embroidered tulle. So you need to have your inner cup pieces sandwiched between the outer cup pieces, and the same 2 fabrics matched together. So now I'm just going to line up my notches, pin the rest of my cup, and sew it with a 6mm seam allowance. Here are my 2 cup pieces sewn together. When sewing this fine fabric, I use a stitch length of 1.8mm, and I don't often back tack when I'm lingerie sewing, but on this top middle point here, I did just to give it more support, as there's not a lot else crossing that part of the seam. So if we open this out, we can see we've got our outer fabric here, and if I flip the lining across, you can see we've got a nicely enclosed seam. Our sheer cup lining meets the bottom point of those scallops. And we've got what looks like a continuous line of scallops across the seam here. So I'm now going to trim my seam a little bit on the inside and top stitch it down, and then we will work on securing this top edge of the lining. Top stitch that center seam that I just made. So now we're going to secure the top line of this sheer cup lining down, and the way I'm going to do that is with some clear elastic. So this is a 6mm wide clear elastic. I'm going to place it just to straddle the edge of that sheer cup lining right across the edge there, and attach it with a narrow 3-step zigzag. I do the 3-step zigzag rather than a normal zigzag because I find it doesn't tunnel, whereas the normal zigzag can tunnel a little bit and create a little lump on where the elastic is. So I'm just going to pop that on. I'm not really going to stretch it, but I am just going to keep it under tension, and having the elastic along the top of the bra cup here is just going to give that added support. Here's the clear elastic applied, so the top edge of the sheer cup lining is secured and the top edge of the cup is supported. So it's time to move on to the bridge. I'm going to move these back into my little flat lay to keep my cups in the right orientation and bring down the bridge. So the first step with my bridge is to secure the top of the embroidered tulle to the top of the sheer cup lining. I'll pop those right sides together. This is an easy bit. I just need to stitch along here with a 6mm seam allowance, and then I'm going to understitch my allowance onto my lining side to keep that secure and flip it right side out. The main bridge piece fabric is attached to the lining fabric at the top here, so I stitched it and then understitched the seam allowance towards the lining side, which just helps that top bit sit nice and crisp. So because I want the scallops at the bottom showing, my seam allowance is the same as the top cup, so it ends at this lowest point of the scallop. It doesn't extend beyond this point. You can see it's finishing lower there because I want those scallops showing just like on the cup piece. So now I need to add the rest of my frame. So bring my pieces down from my layout. I've got a main piece and a lining piece, another main piece and a lining. And I want this seam to be enclosed, so I'm going to flip my frame on top, flip my lining underneath, pin those layers together, stitch with a 6mm seam allowance, and then once they are opened up, my lining and my frame will enclose this seam here. So I'll do that and repeat on the other side. The front frame is all assembled now. So you can see this side frame bit sticks out further down than this middle frame. That's because I want the scallop showing here, and my band elastic will come over this part of my outer frame, flip underneath, and then go underneath my scallop. So this needs to be a little bit extended, so I've got room to turn it under for the band elastic. Now we're up to putting it on the power bar, not the power bar, the power net pieces. on the back wings, and I can make this enclosed also. So what I'm going to do is flip that over right sides together with my main embroidered tulle. Then I kind of fold up the rest of this side of the bra into it to get it out the way a little bit. And I can take the lining piece to my frame, flip it out this way over the top, and then let it join that seam here. So the seam that I'm creating is the side seam of the lining, the back band, the power net part of the back band, and then the side seam of my main fabric. And the other side of the bra is tucked up inside of it. So I'm going to line up these 3 fabrics along this edge, start with a 6mm seam allowance, and then I can pop it all right side out and I'll have a nicely enclosed seam on the side seam as well. That method produces a really nice tidy side seam. You can see we've got an enclosed seam there, and I've gone through and top stitched it down as well using a 3mm long straight stitch. A little tip when you're sewing sheer fabrics is trim your threads as you go, trim them really well, otherwise you kind of run the risk of a thread getting stuck in between the sheer layers, and you can see it once your bra has finished. So our next step is now popping the cups into the frame. If you think it'll be a little bit easier for you, you can baste your loose layers together. So run a basting stitch around the base of your cup and around the cup seam of your frame, just to keep all those layers together. Otherwise, we're just going to pop them in as they are. But first I need to mark my notches so I know where my cups line up to in my frame. Just gone and got the pattern pieces to check, and there aren't actually any notch markings along the frame here, so we don't need to worry about that. I think that just tells me that the center seam on the cup matches up with the seam on the frame, so match those two together, and then just our end points and pin in between. So starting with the left cup as worn, I'm going to flip that over, line up my seams here, and pin that in place. Make sure my bridge is folded where it's supposed to be, and line that up with my scallop. So I want where my 6mm seam allowance is going to hit, I want the 2 pieces to line up here. So my 6mm seam allowance will be stitching here, and we'll finish at this intersection of the cup and the frame piece, so I've got no overhang. And then I'm just going to pin the excess in here. What I like to do is curve it over slightly, and that helps distribute the excess from the cup a little bit into the frame. So make sure my pieces are lined up. Pin that there. I'm just going to go on, carry on pinning about that sort of centimetre and a half apart until I've got my cup all pinned into my frame. Feel free to use as many pins as you like. I personally prefer that method than a no pin method. check that my two ends are looking good and that I feel like my center seam is lined up. Ow! Might keep that in the video, we'll see. So now my cup is pinned in place. I'm going to go through and sew that 6mm seam allowance before coming back and pinning in my second cup. So sew with your cup on top and moving your frame out of the way as you go. First cup is all in place. So I'm just going to do exactly the same thing with this second cup and sew that in. Both cups are in, and I really do think it pays to take your time and check your pinning areas, because I don't think that I could have got that any more perfect, and it was the first go, and it's because I just double checked when I pinned it in place that everything was lining up. So the next thing we're up to is the channeling on the inside of the bra. I'm going to use the dusky pink channeling that comes in the kit that I'm using, and we're going to apply it to the cup side of this cupped frame seam allowance. So the first part that we are going to sew is to move the bulk of the bra out of the way. So we've just got the seam allowance here. Line the edge of the channeling up to your stitch line and stitch just inside here to attach. So I'm going to start on the right cup as if you were wearing it, from the outside through to the in, and then the next cup will be the center through to the outside. And I'm going to leave a small amount unsewn up the top here, so I've got space to apply my elastic and turn that over. In the center, I'm going to sew right up to not quite the top, like that. So when I'm applying the channeling, the plush side is facing up. I make sure I flick the frame out of the way, so I've just got the seam allowance. Line the channeling up to the seam allowance on the cup and sew just 1 millimeter away from the edge of the channeling. So that's fold frame out the way, line it up and sew, fold the frame out the way, line it up and sew. I've applied the first pass of the channeling. You can see it is attached to the seam allowance here with the plush side facing outwards, which will lay against your skin. You can see once it's folded back, it's going to make that channel for the underwire to go in. But before we secure this down, I need to pop on the band elastic. So this is where I'm going to start changing my thread colours, because my band elastic and other elastics are going to be this Arctic blue colour. So whenever I'm sewing, I swap between threads and bobbins depending on what fabric there is. So I'll have both pink and blue in there sometimes. So I start by putting this on with the picots facing up. I'm going to line it up along the bottom of my back band here. I'm going to attach it with a zigzag, and I'm not going to stretch my elastic while it's on the power net. I'm going to stretch my elastic ever so slightly once it moves on to the embroidered tulle here, and I'm going to stop sewing where this step happens in the frame. So I'm going to apply it onto this point and stop my thread here. Then I'm going to make an allowance for how much needs to go across this middle section, which I'm not going to sew down at the moment, but I'm going to start sewing again at this other step in the frame. So I'm then going to start sewing here, again stretch it a fraction on this part and not stretch it along my power net part. So my band will be attached on these sort of wing parts only and will be loose through the center for this first pass. Got the first pass of the band elastic on. You can see it is attached to both sides here, but at the moment not in the middle. And I popped it on with a zigzag that was 3 long and 4 wide, and it goes up to the picots and about halfway through the elastic there. If we look at it from the other side, you can see it's lined up with the fabric. And then I'm going to trim it back. I've already done it on this side, so just nicely and neatly trimmed it back a bit, so when we turn it over there's no chance of any peeking out. So I'm going to do that, trim that side, and then I need to fold it underneath and attach it again. So you can see when it is folded under through there, my scallops come out past the edge, so now I can go along and zigzag the loose edge of the elastic down, so it will flip up like this, and I will be doing a zigzag through the other side of it here to secure that. The second pass of the band elastic has been sewn, so you can see the band is now attached through the center with these scallops here. Next step is to apply some elastic to the underarm area. For that I'm going to use this narrow picot. I need to pop it on with right side down and the picots facing inwards, running along this edge here, and I will stitch this on with the same size zigzag that I did here, the 3 long and 4 wide, and sew it close to the picot edge. So I've got my elastic on with the picots towards the inner side of the bra and the right side of the elastic touching the right side of the bra. I've allowed myself a little bit extra up the top here in case I want to use it to secure a strap, and just making sure my lining layer and my embroidery layer is lined up. I give it the tiniest stretch just to hug it into the body a little bit more, and stitch through here close to the picots, so I'll give it a tiny little stretch. Just going to adjust that a little, make sure it is lining up with the outside. And what I want to make sure I do is pull this channeling out the way. So that's why we didn't stitch it right up to the top, because I want to tuck that out the way so it's not going to get caught up in the elastic. And I want to make sure the seam allowance is still facing the correct way. Just giving it a bit of stretch to hug it around the underarm, and then I don't really need to stretch it once it's on the power net because that will stretch anyway. underarm elastic is applied, you can see that I have done a little zigzag that runs about halfway through the elastic up to the base of the picot. So then when the picot is flipped under, you just see the nice picot edge here. Before I do the second pass, I need to finish off my channeling at the underarm edge. So I need to fold my elastic as it is going to sit once sewn, bring my channeling up here. So I'm going to tuck my channeling underneath the elastic to further secure the edge. So I just need to work out sort of where that's going to roughly sit and do a line of straight stitching back and forth quite a few times here to block off that edge of the channeling so my underwire doesn't poke through. So I'm going to stitch this and then trim off the excess. I've got the underarm edge of my channeling secured with straight stitches here. It's also going to be secured underneath the underarm elastic like this. First, what I want to do is use my duckbill scissors to just trim back the edge here, just to make sure that it doesn't peek out from under the elastic. So I've trimmed the fabric back on the inside here. I've popped my clips in place to hold the channeling, and I'm now going to sew a zigzag stitch, the same 3 long 4 wide, that will secure this outer edge of the elastic. So it's basically going to run from the straight edge through to the middle. I'm not stretching it as I go, I'm just going to smooth it out so that it lays flat as it's getting stitched. Underarm elastic is nicely in place, and it's now time to secure the channeling down. So to do that, I'm just going to run a tiny straight stitch against the very edge here and another one on the outer edge of the channeling here, running the whole way around like that to secure it in place. I sew that from the right side of the bra. It's easy on a sheer bra. You can see through to where you are stitching and making sure that it does line up nicely on the very edge. In a solid bra, I tend to just measure that distance and try and keep a definite distance away from here and sew it from the right side again. I just think it looks a little bit neater sewing it from the right side. So I'm going to do that now and come back and we're on the home stretch. Have the underwire channeling stitched down. Here's what it looks like from the right side. You can see I've got stitching on the very edge of each side of the channeling, and from the inside it looks like this. So I'm going to pop the bra aside for a minute and make some straps. To make adjustable straps, I've got 2 pieces of my strap elastic, 50 centimeters long, and 2 rings and 2 sliders, plus a couple of sewing clips. I sew the straps with a stretch needle in my machine, and to start with I'm going to pop the strap elastic over the center ring of my slider, extending it past by about 1 centimeter or so, lining up the elastic end with the main part of the elastic, and I use a sewing clip to hold that in place. So I pop that on the other side. Line them up. And now I can go to the machine to sew it. So to sew the strap on to the slider, I use a stretch needle and a straight stitch. I move my needle as far across to the right as I can, and I use my sewing clip to hold onto and also keep the underside of the elastic in place so it doesn't end up peeking out either side. We just have a nice flush finish. And then I line up the very side of my presser foot to the side of the slider. And I start sewing so my needle is basically in the middle of the elastic rather than trying to start at the very edge. It's easier to start in the middle. So I'm just popping that down, and then I just sew back and forth 3 or 4 times. Here is the end of my strap with the slider attached. I've trimmed the bit of excess here, and now at this point I pop them together and just double check that they are the same length. Which they pretty much are, but if you need to trim a tiny fraction, just to even them up. And then we need to pop our rings on there. So what I do is lay it out in this C shape with the right side of the elastic on the outside. Pop the ring on there, and then we just need to complete this circle by coming up this side of the slider, back over that center bar and through the other side of the slider. And then we can pull the ring to the end, adjust that part a little bit, and we have an adjustable strap. Now, to attach our straps on, quite often the bra will have like the cut end of the strap attached along the back band here, and then this part loops up and you'll have a little extension on your elastic here that feeds through the ring and holds it to the cup. On this pattern, however, there is a little extension along the back band, finishing here, attaching into the loop, and then this cut end of the strap attaches directly onto the cup. So that's how I'm going to do it for this bra. So I'm just going to take a section of this end of the strap and attach it onto here with a little bit extra that will then attach onto the loop. So I'll cut that through here and then flip the rest of the strap around and attach it that way. Before attaching on the strap though, you need to check this distance here that will attach onto your hook and eye, and just make sure that it isn't too big. Sometimes you might need to shave off a tiny little bit of the band, matching it into the curve there, just to make this the right width to fit your hook and eye. But in this case, mine is actually a fraction too small, so I'm just going to pop my strap onto the back band slightly over the cut edge of the band here and just take up that little bit of extra width that I need. So I'm going to sew that on with a small zigzag. I sew a small zigzag through the middle of the strap, and then there's a really loud truck that went past. A small zigzag through the middle of the strap, and then another small zigzag to secure this side of it. So I'm going to go do that now and come back to attach the rest of the strap. Straps are attached at the back band point. I've got my 2 rows of little zigzag there, and I've just allowed a little bit of an extension on the strap here so that it fits my hook and eye a little bit better. So I am going to trim back this excess power net using my duckbill scissors, and then I'm going to cut my strap off with a couple of centimeters extension so that I can attach this part of the ring on here. And one other thing I like to do is just trim off 1 or 2 of the picots here, just so my hook and eye sits a little bit more flush with the band. So we'll do those. So now we attach the rest of the strap. Our little extension that we left here is going to feed through that part of the ring, turn under and straight stitch across here to hold that in place. The rest of our strap is going to come up the top here. I'll trim off this little bit of elastic that I've left and then straight stitch that loose end of the strap onto my cup. Straps are in place. Our ring is here to provide movement attached to the back band, the adjustable slider, and then the other end of it is just secured onto the cup. One of our last stages is adding on the hook and eye. So we've got the eye side here. To secure these on, I really like to use a couple of clips plus a pin. And I place the band in and just really wriggle and push that right into place. So make sure the bottom is lined up and in, hold it with a clip. The same for the top. And then I pop a pin through the middle. This pink and blue color combination is just looking so nice. To secure the hook and eye on, I use a really small zigzag, so about 2 mils wide and by 0.8 long, so it's like a little satin stitch, going all the way down, just butting over the edge, so it nicely seals that edge. So I'm going to attach that now. And the hook side, I usually, because the hooks are slightly annoying in the way of the presser foot, pop this on and then I attach that just with a straight stitch up and down. Hook and eyes are sewn on with a little narrow zigzag along the edge here for the eye side, and then my hooks are popped on with a straight stitch. So all that's left to do now is feed our underwires into the channeling. I'm going to do a straight stitch across here to seal them off, and then I'm going to add some cute little bows and we're done. Thanks for watching. I hope you picked up some tips useful in your bra making. Next video will be a Thursday thong to turn this into a matching set. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.